Hello, everyone. Welcome. Making sure that everything is muted on the YouTube and stuff side. How is everybody doing? Are you all well? So-so? You know, so-so is good when the other option is living in hell. The world's on fire, indeed. The world is on fire, and we are merely pawns in this big game. But you know what? We manage. We do things, we manage. And what I've realized over the past few weeks, especially with all of the stuff that is going on interpersonally, that we have so little time. Yeah, life is quite long, but we have so little time with the people who matter the most to us that we can't, I wouldn't say take it for granted, we can't waste time being petty. We've got to care for each other, we've got to feed each other, we've got to be good. Above all else, just be kind. All right, so we are on page 63 of the book that we've been reading for the past few weeks. We've got quite a dense amount to go through, not just today, but like the whole book is quite dense. It is called Rape, a South African Nightmare by a dear friend and comrade of mine, Pumla Dineo Gqola. And Pumla is Pumla is a lecturer at the Nelson Mandela University in what used to be known as Port Elizabeth, which is now Gqeberha. I cannot get the Q click right. Gqeberha. Because, yeah, I've had surgery on my palate. It's quite weird. And she's a women's rights activist, and her specialty is in gender studies, specifically on gender, sexuality, and rape in South Africa. So we are on page 63, chapter 3. This talk of the empowerment of women as currently employed and aired in South Africa rests on the assumption that ensuring some women have access to wealth, positions in government, and corporate office. This is enough gender progressive work for our society, apparently. This assumption is flawed on various levels, even if increased representation of women all across sectors of our society is a worthwhile and necessary project. Firstly, not all women have access to high office because class, homophobia, race, and xenophobia mediate women's access to power. At its best, therefore, this formula would empower a small select number of women in the terrain of work and leave the rest unempowered. Secondly, the dominant talk of empowerment of women also translates to the expectation that women should adapt to the current system, being empowered into position, rather than transforming the formal workplace into a space that is more receptive to women's contributions, needs, and wants. And this is something that I'm constantly talking about. That success within the current system is not a measure of success, nor is it a measure of empowerment. Because true empowerment requires the current system to be completely taken apart. It requires that women in this country try to attain, within the formal workplace, the status of honorary men, as Mampela Rampele said of another time, a concept she expanded on in a 1998 interview with Kimberly Yates and myself, as well as in her essay, Political Widowhood in South Africa, The Embodiment of Ambiguity. And that is an excellent essay to read, and I will look for it and put it in the server when we are done here today. And for those of you who don't know, Mampela Rampele, she was an activist, kind of shifted toward the right a little bit, still not right, but kind of shifted towards it. And she became a millionaire. Thus, although women's representation in all sectors of our society initially emerged as a radical feminist call for transformation in the interest of a more equitable society, the version we have now, at least in public talk, is so watered down that it threatens to stall social transformation. It also means that those attempts, successful and failed by women to alter the economic landscape, are routinely underreported and undervalued. It is against this invisibilization of women's real transformative work that one of the most powerful women in South Africa's business sector, Nolita Fakude, spoke when she told the South African National Editors Forum that you do us no favors when you make us seem like no more than pretty faces in reporting on black economic empowerment deals. The hijacked women empowerment talk is also flawed in a third sense. Shireen Hasim reminds us, changing inequalities in society and economic power will require not just the increased representation of women within the state, but also increased and assertive representation of poor women within the state, as well as strong feminist movements outside the state. In other words, it is only through a comprehensive contestation of representation and voice across class that meaningful gender transformation is possible. And that's something that we need to reckon with. I'm constantly saying that having Simone Biles be the greatest gymnast to have ever lived is not a measure of transformation in gymnastics. In fact, they hate her there. They love her work. They absolutely love that she is this young black face who is doing so much good for black women in gymnastics. But the fact that she is the first black woman to have hauled ass at the Olympics with all of her medals is telling. She is not a measure of black excellence. She is a measure of black exceptionalism, because she is the exception to the rule, whereas whiteness is the rule. Because how many black girls do you know that have similar kind of access to the kind of training that she's had access to, that most white girls across the world have access to? The fourth flaw emerges when we recognize that this conservative woman empowerment debate only really applies to women while they are in official public spaces, like the workplace. A completely different set of rules, framed in direct contradiction to the ostensible women's empowerment discourse, continue to govern the private world of the home and other spaces, public transport, the streets, clubs, restaurants, shebeens, etc. Outside of work, the dominant gender talk is that women must adhere to limiting notions of femininity. The recycling of the cult of femininity takes place across all sectors, as public culture demonstrates, so pervasive that it retains high visibility among the ranks of ostensibly high-powered women. In interview after media interview, the question is posed to economically powerful women: who are you, really? Thus, pressure is applied to prove that they exhibit traditionally feminine traits. In other words, that as powerful and such women are at work, they submit to the patriarchal cult of femininity elsewhere, illustrating that South African media is just as much a product of the society as it is of a global late capitalist patriarchal order. That not talk? What do you mean? The one question that really annoys me in media interviews is, can a woman have it all? Business, family, all of that stuff. Yes, baby. Thank you for the tea. You're handsome. I love you. Good night. Being so, yeah, is better than not being. It's because black women aren't as rich as white women. Absolutely. 100%, Sam. When you are pretending to be a man in a pinstripe suit in the office, you are allowed to not be feminine. You have to fit within a certain lens of femininity within that context. But in those spaces, you have to pretend, you have to perform manliness in order to be considered a good leader, in order to be considered good at business. As soon as you step outside of that role, you have to become hyper feminine. You have to be able to bake an apple pie on a Saturday morning and do yoga and take care of the kids and to prove that you are therefore balanced. I argued in my book, A Renegade Called Simpiwe, the discourse of women's empowerment also serves to strengthen the idea that the new South African woman, in ways, both idealize her and set up as in constant danger of falling from grace and becoming a train wreck. When you think of women and femmes in high positions or in very public-facing positions, if they are not feminine in their private lives, if they are not feminine in the way they dress, if they are not feminine in or espousing patriarchal ideas of what woman is, how often have we seen women and femmes like that completely demonized? We see it all too often, because that demonization is what keeps other women and femmes in check. He just wants the door open. He's meowing on the side, meowing on that side. I don't know what to do with him. Yes, we see it on sitcoms all the time. Absolutely, Wolfie. What did we call Britney Spears when she went through a mental breakdown? We demonized her. I, for one, owe Britney Spears an apology. Yes, Sam, conform or suffer. This highly circulated cult of femininity is not unconnected to the experiences of many women. The Republic of South Africa, therefore, has the contradictory situation where women are legislatively empowered, yet we do not feel safe in our streets or our homes. Truly empowered women do not live with the haunting fear of rape, sexual assault, smash and grabs, and other violent intrusions into our spaces, bodies, and psyches. A country that empowers women would grant us our entitlement of freedom of movement, sexual autonomy, bodily integrity, and safety. A genuinely gender-progressive country is without the gender-based violence statistics that South Africa has, making South African women collectively a majority, as at 52%, under siege. There simply are no two ways about it. It certainly does not watch and participate in curative or corrective rape against the most marginal, black lesbians and or poor women. Corrective rape is one of the most disgusting things to me. And I'll explain that in a minute. The hijacked women's empowerment hype is not a real conversation because it is not transformative. It's a smokescreen, assuming that women are the only ones who need empowerment, as limited as routes to empowerment are, and it leaves the cult of femininity intact and violent masculinities untouched and unchallenged. The government and other powers that be, specifically capitalist powers, have no problem saying women's empowerment, as long as it doesn't disrupt the status quo, as long as it doesn't disrupt patriarchal norms. Yes, you're allowed to be a CEO, but at home, you're not CEO, you're mom, your wife, you're subservient. And let's not forget that being a CEO does nothing to empower other women. In fact, being a CEO as a woman, pay your fucking workers more. Transform the companies. Ensure gender equity in your own company, instead of throwing other women under the bus and not allowing the amount of parental leave that they need. Asking questions such as, are you going to have a baby anytime soon, to all the women who interview and not to the men. Gender transformative work requires that masculinities, black, white, straight, queer, be radically revisited and transformed in the interest of a country that is not just gender equitable on paper. It demands honesty in dealing with the siege under which all South African women continue to live. Tenjiwe Mtsinso once remarked, "You find that there are comrades who bow to the question of gender equality, but in terms of their own behavior are quite different." Whereas Rushila Nair wrote a poem about the same contradiction. Let's say it loud about the other day how we were talking about Comrade X, who went home and gave his wife a blue eye, after we'd all clapped an hour before for the liberation speech he gave with such conviction. We are not speaking these truths enough, and until we are able to address them, as well as the long histories we come from, approach them with new imaginative ways to break these patterns, we will continue to live with the scourge of gender-based violence. It does not help to pretend, as millions do, that our denial will protect us. It hasn't done so thus far. The grip of violence is tightening around our collective necks. Those who pretend to be stunned by the stats are lazy and not making the connections between the various ways in which what is normal heterosexual play contain codes that inscribe feminine passivity and masculine aggression to us. That South Africa has the highest rate of femicide in the world is telling, because we have the most progressive constitution in the world. Our constitution is celebrated in international human rights spaces as the most progressive constitution the world has ever seen. Absolutely, Wolfie. They still serve the masters of capital. Those CEOs. Yeah, just put lipstick on the word CEO and it's all fine, right? But this is not just unique to South Africa. Because how do you see the US as being marketed? Have you ever seen how the US and US tourism and the green card lottery, these summer get a summer job in the US programs are marketed to the rest of the world? Have you ever seen anything like that? Overperformative masculinity, yes. So the US is marketed to us as this place that is so free that you can walk along any street at night, all on your own, and be perfectly safe, no matter who you are. No matter what your gender identity, no matter what your race, that you will be absolutely safe because America is the land of the free, where you can be whoever you want to be and do whatever you want to do with your life. That is how the US is marketed. These jails and walls keep us free. Yep. People get a shock when they go to the States and they see what it actually is. Fortunately, I was educated by some of the best teachers I've ever had who debunked all of that right from the get-go, saying, hey, when you go to the States, even on holiday, if you see a white person in danger, don't help them. The cops will kill you, thinking that you're the attacker. That hit hard. So even the countries that purport to be the freest of the free, the most marginalized, are always endangered by the three things I constantly talk about: capital, white supremacy, and patriarchy. Tarnished lump of shit on a hill. It never was. Yes, the US never was. The US was never free. Honestly, the only time America was great was before the Mayflower. We saw it in the twist of the arm as teenage girls, the assumption that girls play hard to get and therefore should be pursued at all costs, regardless of what they say. The bizarre and oppressive claims that women cannot say what they mean and mean what they say. Consequently, a man can see that an out lesbian is aroused and decided to quote unquote have sex with her, since an aroused woman cannot be left alone. We eliminate the equally ridiculous claims that as women we are so stupid, so passive, and so beaten down that we can only wear short skirts, revealing tight clothes, get drunk, wear kangas, smoke cigarettes, and or do drugs, or anything to signal to men that we are aroused and we are asking for it. It's a strange country we live in, where women are so ostensibly empowered and yet cannot communicate what we want sexually. It's also a strange country where women need to be cured of being lesbians, since this is made out to be just another way in which we play hard to get and put ourselves out of the ownership of violent men. And I don't know if you've noticed so far, those who have been with us from the start of reading this book. She's constantly talking about being in the ownership of men. I am watching Bridgerton for, I think, the 4th or 5th time now. Yes, I'm enjoying it. I enjoy the series. It is beautifully done. The only thing I find completely wrong with Bridgerton, for what it is the fact that it completely overestimates the number of sunny days that England has in summer. Even there, the not so subtle message is women are property. A woman can only have value if she is married and married with a title. There's the sense of ownership and the ridiculousness of royalty, the ridiculousness of the fanfare of upper class England, of the genteel society. It's all ownership. Men of title cannot work. Women of title cannot be seen cohorting, cavorting with those who don't have titles. This is a ridiculous lie, and it's not new. We know what is responsible for the scourge of gender-based violence, and we need to confront violent masculinities. We need to confront and reject violent men and patriarchal men and women who protect and enable them. So, when somebody in your family says your skirt is too short, why? Is it going to make people faint? Is it going to kill someone? Women and children being property, other humans as property. Yep. Oh, we'll get to other humans as property. Whenever a woman says to me now, like, hey, your bra strap is showing, does my izzat lie in my bra strap? Izzat, I can't really translate it. Izzat is the Hindi word for honor. Thank you, Meg. It's not honor as such. I can't translate it, but you know what I'm talking about. Hey, Judas. Yeah, I asked him, is my izzat contained in my bra strap? Or is it the person I am? Why aren't you having children? You're not fulfilled as a woman. Is my fulfillment in my womb? Oh, it's just silly, Wolfie. Absolutely silly. Please continue to tap the screen, share the live, make sure all of those good things are done. I don't know if I have a gift goal, but I do have a goal for my PayPal. If you want to have a look, see. Hi, Taro. Good to see you. Good luck with the homework. Audre Lorde said again and again, your silence will not protect you. Our silence, says Bell Hooks, is complicity. Aw, that's okay. Did you take pictures? If you did, I'll show you how to actually see them through those pictures. There's no fence sitting on this one, no convenient grey areas. Nadine Hutton, as then she was, had an exhibition as part of the 2006 Ruth First lecture when I first presented this essay. Nadine Hutton is their dead name, Dean Hutton. Brilliant, brilliant artist and a dear friend of mine. In that work, her camera points to some of these patterns of violent masculinity and the cyclical nature of violence. Her work also painfully indicts South African society because through the subject, the woman, whose story she documents, is a white working-class woman. Her story is in many ways not spectacular, and by that I don't mean that she's not important or unique as an individual human being, but rather that the pattern of abuse is played out in so many homes across the country, across province, race, and class. Got you, Taro. I'll show you in the server. Gender-based violence is ordinary, everywhere, commonplace, made to seem normal. Marianne Tam highlights some of this when she speaks about the routine sexual harassment of girls in her middle-class white suburb as she grew up, when she zooms in on 3 men, all of them from good backgrounds, fathers of children who were my friends, trying to cop a feel when no one was listening. She says, I can still feel their clammy grip of their hands on my elbow or arm. From experiences lived, shared, and related, we know how widespread the endemic gender-based violence is. We can undo it by unmasking the collective denial, that lie that we tell about how we don't know who is abusing and raping up and down the length and breadth of South Africa. We do know the man who slaps his girlfriend around at the party, the one who drags her across the parking lot, the teacher who impregnates high school girls without permission because we do not hold him accountable for statutory rape, the taxi driver who tells homophobic and misogynist jokes, the comrade who assumes that he can touch whichever woman he finds attractive in the movement, the leader who harasses women in his organization, the colleague who rapes and gets away with it. The idea that people's value if they have children, whether they're wanted or not, yep. Oh yeah, because women are just breeding machines, right? We know these men, we know who they are, and when we say nothing, we are complicit in how they spread gender-based violence with our protection, I would say with our endorsement. When we are the kind of woman who never believe a girl or another woman's narrative of rape, or believe her but tell her to keep quiet anyway because their story will embarrass him or us, we are complicit with the siege under which we live. Oh, I love that she has an asterisk here. We need to rethink our own behavior and responses to gender-based violence if we are these kinds of women, and we need to be able to disown women of all classes who defend violent men and who protect them, not just the poor who will perform outside a courtroom. At the same time, while it's not just men who are responsible for the scourge under which we live, since many women think that patriarchy rewards its foot soldiers, oh, I love this. Since many women think that patriarchy rewards its foot soldiers, every man in this country has a responsibility to counter gender-based violence and enable meaningful gender transformation. Thank you so much. You are amazing. It's good to see you, Hector. Okay, I'm going to read something to you from my book that I have stopped writing because it's painful to write right now. I have to find it in my Google Docs. Oh, why is it not here? I cannot find it. Aha, there it is. Brown women are the foot soldiers that keep movements together. I say this with the utmost conviction. When it comes to revolution, we are the ones who hold it together like glue and enable the work to continue. We are also the targets of the frustrations of the men in said movement. Yet our struggle to survive as brown women inevitably comes second to the issues of race and class. Hooks wrote about the interconnectedness of struggles, whereby social classifications of race, gender, sexual identity, and class, among other socio-political and economic attributes, are interconnected, and that ignoring their intersection creates oppression towards women and changes the experiences of living as women in society, especially for women of color, who more often than not sit at the bottom of the food chain in terms of race, gender, and class. She expressed this in Ain't I a Woman, that Black American women were given the scraps of society, and this text completely changed how the world perceived Black women. Sadly, the work is still relevant today. The work can be applied to women of color the world over, especially Black trans women, who are targeted at a higher rate than any other demographic in the world. Victims of these hate crimes, killed by acquaintances, partners, involve clear anti-transgender bias, while other cases involve transgender statuses putting them at risk by forcing them into unemployment, poverty, houselessness, and or survival sex work. And while gender identity plays a large role in the targeting of women of color, the fact that women of color are targets at all is indicative of how little has changed since Hooks wrote Ain't I a Woman in 1981. Women of color have always served on the front lines in the fight for gender equality, especially in that of racial equality. Yet the fact that women have served as both foot soldiers and caregivers in these movements is more often than not overlooked. Women of color have distinctive standpoints from which to understand the intersections of race and gender in unique experiences of oppression. An experience so vastly different to their white woman counterparts that it took 2 whole amendments in the U.S. Constitution to add women of color to the voters' roll, and still, the world is yet to see equal voting rights. A century after slavery and indenture were abolished, and a mere 28 years after the end of apartheid, race and gender continue to create divergent and uneven outcomes for women of color. In 2021, the uncontrolled gender pay gap that measures the median salary for all genders states that women earn 82 cents for every dollar earned by men, and Black women earn 97 cents for every dollar earned by a white man with the same job qualifications. Still, women of color continue to experience occupational and economical disadvantages that reflect the ways both race and gender affect experiences today. Angela Davis, in Gender, Race and Class, says Black women and working class women in particular have been excluded from women's movements led by white women, and how women from these marginalized groups have articulated their issues and resisted hegemonic structures to fight for rights and been demonized for doing exactly that. I'll send you the whole thing, Hector. It's an essay I wrote that is going into my book. I'll absolutely send you the whole thing. I do have your email address, so I'll share the Google Doc with you. And so why I'm juxtaposing that with this? Because while women are the foot soldiers of movements. Women of color are the foot soldiers of movements for gender, racial, even economic equality. I would say at this point in history, what, 4 years after I wrote this piece, I would say that black and brown women have taken over in vociferousness against economic subjugation as well. Yeah, yes, Tara. Tara asks if this is Hector with two R's. Juxtapose it with this. And this is something that you will hear me say again and again and again, and I will never stop saying it. White women are the foot soldiers of white supremacist patriarchy. Taro, you're lucky I can't mute you there. Because I don't know how to. That's you. Yeah, white women are the foot soldiers of white supremacist patriarchy. And you can quote me on that. More on that later. We need to think about how we speak to and about women and girls, especially men. They need to question what they were taught and what they are teaching boys and younger men when they conflate strength with being emotionally hard and excusing violence, when they think women are just bodies and that we need to be controlled. One of my favorite TV shows in 2006 offered us a vision of a young, highly intelligent, creatively inspired black man who, episode after episode, season after season, brought issues of women's sexual autonomy, bodily integrity, gender-based violence, progressive masculinities, and breaking patterns of violent masculinities into our living rooms. And yet, this is one of the most popular and watched programs. He is top entertainment personality in South Africa. Now that I'm not holding Bongi Nkosi Dlamini up as a god, he's certainly not paying me to say this. Subsequent to this public lecture and first publication of excerpts from it, Dlamini's relationship with men, women, and violence received extensive media attention with conflicting reports. It's therefore important to highlight this as I revise this essay for publication. The point I was making about the existence of a specific show whose challenging of gender power was exciting, not an endorsement of how Dlamini may live his life, illustrated quite clearly that there is another way, and that there is a space within contemporary South Africa for quote-unquote freed zones on gender, and there are people receptive to this message. Oh, so I'm unaware of the meme. I am borrowing the concept of liberated zones from Frelimo in Mozambique, in the Mozambican guerrilla movement. I think that histories of freed zones that we have as legacy in this region should inspire us. The point of freed zones is, of course, that ultimately they spread so that the whole country is one large liberated zone. And yes, it is hard work. It's very hard work. But we have embraced the need to do hard work before. Revolutionary work is always hard, as Steve Biko taught us. With his comrades in the Black consciousness movement, they left us a legacy that teaches us that what we think about ourselves, how we feel, how we function in the world, can be unlearned. Psychological liberation matters. Abso-fucking-lutely. It was Stephen Bantu Biko who said, "The most potent weapon in the hands of the oppressor is the mind of the oppressed." It is one of his most famous quotes for a reason, and it is one of the reasons that he was killed by the apartheid police. Because he was teaching the oppressed to unoppress themselves in their mind first. Tarot. We need psychological liberation from violent masculinities and the cult of femininity, to learn to engage as partners across genders, to respect women's bodily autonomy and entitlement to sexual and men's entitlement to sexual and other pleasures. We need to disown violence everywhere, except in self-defense. I started out by linking silence in our gender talk to violent masculinities and the cult of femininity. We cannot reshape patriarchy without an honest look at our society. It's good to see you, Wolfie. Let me know when you're free to chat. It'll be good to talk. It's been too long. We cannot reshape patriarchy without an honest look at our society, language, and everyday practices. As black and brown people, we have relearned how to love our hair textures, our varied tones, our hips, our sound, our creative legacies, and in the main, how to take other black and brown people seriously. You know, there is, in a sense, our own race, and how we expect so little of our own people. It actually hurts when I see it. Like when I was telling people that I'm applying for PhDs. Really? Like what? Really? Like, what is this ambition? What are you going to do with a PhD? What's the point? We can learn to value freedom, even when we are not under attack. We are not going to get very far if we ignore history, since how we deal with our history has everything to do with who we are and who we can be. That's part of the powerful legacy that the BC movement bestowed on us. But history is untidy, so working through it is even more hard work. Those in lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, intersex, queer movements know that this is true too, because the experience of living in a homophobic society makes it hard to love your gender non-conforming, same-sex, same-gender loving self. If we choose to embark on this road, however, we may as well give up on our constitution and that beautiful self-loving, self-valuing vision that it offers us, because it's just a piece of paper at the end of the day. How we talk about how gloriously revolutionary the 1980s were. We are right. But what are the connections between the downplaying of women's roles in the struggle and what the experience of that role was? To revisit the history of activism means taking seriously the fact that women had experiences that sometimes complicate narrow retellings of the struggle. This is not just true of the 1980s. I start with the 80s because of what else young black women, lesbian, straight, bisexual, were experiencing in addition to sexist and racist state brutality. Whatever we may want to use as a lens to explain jackrolling in Transvaal townships, which was pervasive, or the rise of Insara as part of the gendered gang violence of the Cape Flats, these cannot continue to be moments we gloss over. Ingrid Masondo pointed out in an interview recently that ignoring the phase of our collective history throws away those many, many black and brown people who were kidnapped, gang raped, over a period of a decade in urban areas, and a longer period in rural ones. This complicates commonplace feminist arguments that holds that most women are sexually violated by men that they know, and that consequently stranger danger presents a small part of the problem. In South Africa, for successive generations, the fear of public abduction by strange men was not just real, but also very likely, especially if you were black and brown. We make these women disposable citizens when we pretend this era away. Misogyny within human rights movements is rife, still, today. What happens to that collective trauma? Masondo asks. It's a chilling question. What happens to the collective trauma of... Oh my goodness, I forgot about this. Ukutalwa. I'm going to have to take a bit to explain that in a little bit. Being jackrolled or falling prey to Insara, most of these women are alive today. They experienced it. Explanations of this as state-sponsored black-on-black violence are unhelpful because they do not tell us how to deal with the collective trauma. The incessant communication to us in our formative years that as black and brown women, we do not have freedom of movement. That communication is reinforced by the stats today, and recently by drama such as the incredibly damaging masculinist posturing around Jacob Zuma's rape trial. As a teenager, although I'd never been to Cape Town, I had only briefly been to one township, in what was then the Transvaal. News and details of the exploits of jackrolling in the Transvaal gangs and Insara that terrorized Cape Town townships from their base in Inyanga East reached far and wide. The women I went to school with in Inanda Seminary and the outskirts of Durban and All Saints Senior College, Nibisho, spoke with terror, writing about how Insara captured the public imagination even in the fraught 1980s township life in Cape Town. Sandile Dikeni calls Insara gangsters a strangely organized criminal phenomenon and one of their most testing experiences of 1980s Cape Town, and how similar gangs retained a firmer grip on the memory of the time, and even the brutal Witdukker, the notorious cop called Barnard, or some of the vigilante forces, for the want of better descriptions, in the taxi industry. For Dikeni, it was the combination of political apathy and the rise of crime that enabled these, and Insara in particular, to rise as they did. He relates an encounter with them on the bus. It was a common sight to watch Insara marching in some disorganized way down some main road in Nyanga East, brandishing every kind of weapon imaginable. In one of these exhibitions of gang power, I had the unpleasant opportunity to witness the false sense of authority that mob psychology grants young people. This particular march was led by somebody called Utoyopo. Toyopo was a young boy who earned his flamboyancy by undressing himself to the waist and making strange noises and blood-curdling ululations while he led his troop of nearly 100 or so skepsels who felt absolutely untouchable. In this crazy spell, Tiopo, brandishing some quite dangerous-looking daggers, would momentarily stop, throw himself to the ground, mutter more strange words, and then roll to the pavement and start sharpening his assegai to the absolute glee of his followers. I was very young at that time. But I have something here as well. Okay, so the practice of Ukutwalwa. This is what I'm going to explain now. It was called in the townships the irregular proposal, achieving customary law marriage of underage brides. Ukutwalwa may be used in a number of purposes, such as forcing the father to give consent, to avoid expenses of a wedding, to hasten matters if the girl was pregnant, to persuade the seriousness of the suitor's intent, or avoid the paying of lobola. Lobola is the price of the cows that men have to pay to the woman's family. But it is essentially the kidnapping, the abduction of women, and mostly girls who are 16 or well, younger than 18, between the ages of 16 and I would say 20. We hear about it less today. It doesn't mean it doesn't happen. Me and my friends were unwittingly witnesses to ukutalwa when we were in primary school. Yeah, it was one of the most terrifying things. Yeah. Insara obviously understood the power of public performance of power and terror. How could they not, growing up as black people in townships where the state performed terror publicly through presence, patrolling, shootings, beatings, abductions, tear gassing, and other forms of terrorizing communities. And of course, like other gangs, rape was simply one of the range of criminal and violent ways in which Insara operated. As Dikeni said, the rise of Insara was so decidedly opposed to organized activism, and interestingly, it was the activists who ultimately rid Nyanga East of them through violent means that were nonetheless self-defense. How horribly ironic for women whose foremothers marched to the Union building decades before. An unaccompanying question needs to be asked. What happened to all those young men who were jackrollers or Insara? What ways did being unable to get away... In what ways did being able to get away with mass rape solidify violent masculine patterns? And what kinds of socialization did it have on other black men and boys watching? What unintended consequences for masculinities and femininities followed from this? And how much of what has become normal has roots here? How does another history of sanctioned women's kidnapping contribute to the possibility of jackrolling being normal? At which point do we take responsibility for unlearning harmful behavior, regardless of which part of our complicated history it comes from? At which point do violent men in this country and the women who are their cronies, women Desiree Lewis has called phallic women, stop using culture as a way of justifying violating us? We know that today women do not feel safe in the streets or in their homes in South Africa, that women's bodies are seen as accessible for consumption, touching, raping, kidnapping, commenting on, grabbing, twisting, beating, burning, maiming, and control, that women are denied the very freedom that empowerment suggests, the very freedom the Constitution protects. I feel safer under our Constitution than I do with any other country's constitution. And our constitution is bulletproof. It does not prevent people from committing the acts that are against it. And the problem is often made women's responsibility. The police warn women drivers to yield at a red robot and drive on. Robot is what we call traffic lights, by the way. South Africa is a strange place. And drive on when we feel unsafe at night. To be extra vigilant when we approach one and see black men approaching, or to avoid traveling alone. In other words, privileged women should take responsibility for the fact that we/they may be attacked at any time and modify our behavior accordingly. This is something that we've spoken about at length. But what that is doing, in my opinion, is saying, target the other girl. Target the other woman. Target someone else, not me. Less privileged women who rely on public transport are warned not to be out in deserted areas, encouraged to dress conservatively to avoid the front seat of a minibus taxi. The message is clear. Women, modify your behavior. Adjust all aspects of your life, in the chance that you might fall prey to serial killers or other gender-based violences. We made a list when I was at university of all the things that women and girls do to keep ourselves safe. I added one recently to that document that I still have. It's on one of my hard drives from my undergrad days. Hello, my love. How was the rest of your birthday? Something that South African women have done and told me time and time again, when they get into an Uber, they rip out strands of their own hair and leave it in the car, just in case that's the last place they were seen. Oh, nice. Well done. Yay for backsplash. That, out of context, that sounds so weird. Oh, another $25. Amazing. Nicely done. How much was it in total? Oh, yes. And remember, I've got my PayPal goal. The link is in my link tree. These warnings do not work, and they are dangerous, because they communicate quite unequivocally that South African public spaces do not belong to women. They are the same messages that Insara and Jack Rollers and those who engaged in Gqola communicated to the 45% majority that is black women in this country, and in this regard, in line with apartheid state-sponsored terror. They communicate this quite clearly. You better make yourself safe, or seem safe, in order to be safe. Stay at home, participate in the cult of femininity, give in to unwanted sexual advances, surrender your choices, make yourself small, quiet, and as invisible as possible, unless men want to see you. But in the true style of all patriarchy's promises, they lie. Because women, as South African women, we cannot escape gender-based violence even when we play by the rules of the cult of femininity. South African women and girls are saying that across sexual orientation, in classrooms of urban and rural South Africa, in streets, towns, the fields, and homes, buses, taxis, trains, private cars, shopping malls, cafes, factories, hospitals, the criminal justice system either re-violates or ignores us. The statistics support us. All the while, gender-conservative men threaten and violently silence women who speak out in self-defense against a former vice president in 2006 and then state president in 2015 when this book was published, and the woman who helped elect him, despite his misogyny about what women want when we dress in a certain way, act in a certain way. There is clear and urgent need to change South Africa's public and private gender talk. We need to tackle violent masculinities head on, exposing the disdain to which violent men hold all women. As part of this, we need to rid ourselves of the passwords that Sibongile and Dashe speaks of in Can I Speak Please, which refer to the disclaimers and qualifiers that silence real debate on gender-based violence. 70 altogether. Excellent. Hector's going to scold me about this, but send me your PayPal. This is what happens when people come up onto our panels and say, oh, you should say some men. Oh, but no, it's not all men, and you should change the way you talk about this. ACAB also includes the tone police. Ndashe says that these passwords are a prerequisite that goes something akin to not all men are rapists, and in the past, some people have been falsely accused. continuing to mouth these passwords and demanding them before you listen to what women have to say is part of the problem. A significant part of the discourse on gender-based violence requires such quote-unquote passwords, which by their very existence prevent us from finding a way out of the siege itself. So those black and white feminists who defend these passwords by contesting the gender talk around, like Jacob Zuma's rape trial, were dismissed as elites, irresponsible, disingenuous, and out of touch with the most poor women who were coyly called real women on the ground, especially when queer women advocated for Kwezi, his victim. It's an incredible statement coming from elite men, and amazingly condescending, since these men, who we are to assume know better about what women want, these passwords bar access to a hearing by a general audience. Who is it that makes up this general audience? Patriarchal women and opportunistic men, conservative men, who think that claiming that there is a conspiracy justifies making black women's bodies expendable battlegrounds. Welcome back, Wolfie. Thank you. Gender conservative South African men would do well to choose another battleground, because claiming that women who call them on their misogyny do not speak as real South African women is direct complicity with the scourge of gender-based violence that is upon us. These general audience members, who sit proudly among those who are determined to make women's entitlement to bodily integrity and autonomy impossible, hold us hostage. It is on their feet, especially, that I laid the gauntlet of rethinking and unlearning our own violent masculinities. It is they too, and sometimes they especially, who must be vigilant in the face of how gendering their identities is part of what makes violence normal. How are you doing, Philly? Men who understand, exactly. Men who understand it don't say that. Men who understand say it is all men. Men who understand say it is like every single man has the responsibility of gender-based violence on their shoulders. They must contribute to gender progressive efforts to ensure that women are economically empowered in ways that alter the South African landscape, and eradicate patriarchal myths that nurture the delusions of grandeur and power that so many men suffer from, and that encourage grotesque senses of entitlement, in the words of Elaine Salo in her presentation of the Harold Wolpe Memorial Trust Open Dialogue event. It's not enough for leaders of political formations of various sorts to mouth commitment to gender equity when they excuse misogyny spoken in their midst. It is irresponsible and violent for them to defend violence against women. We need gender transformative education that is not left only in the classroom, but also alters how we parent, ensuring it is the responsibility of everyone and not just women to expose, disown, and hold accountable those men who act violently towards women and children. After our collective witnessing of the unfolding of events around Zuma's rape trial, I hope we reflect more critically on how to do the work of resisting and unlearning violent masculinities and dissociating ourselves from the cult of femininity. I have said it before and I will say it again. The Jacob Zuma rape trial and the incredible brutality it invited in his male and female supporters held a mirror to our faces as a country. As those who work toward the end of gender-based violence know, the case was typical of rape cases in most ways. It and its defendant were not exceptional, except the case magnified how society and the legal justice system act in some cases. Powerful men. I always say that the most terrifying thing to me is an angry white man. Just men. Men in general. I jokingly say that I love women and femmes, and I am attracted to men on sufferance against my will. I love the men in my life. I have been so privileged to meet some of the most amazing men. Yeah, Taro. Being socialized as a certain gender is a powerful thing, even if you are not that gender. Having been socialized as a boy and then a man until, such a time that you realized who you really were, or you came into your own, it's powerful conditioning. The men that I've met in my life, I tell my father that he's problematic. He understands it. My husband is problematic. He gets it. And the fact that he makes me a cup of tea every morning and every evening doesn't change the fact that his potential violence is never zero. And understanding that even these amazing men that we know have the capability of harming us at any point. And we just don't know when, how, or why. I'm scared of men. I'm glad you asked, Clenchley. You can go to any of these apps and watch the recap. Perhaps it brought us to a crisis point, and we can choose to learn and do the hard work. I hope we come closer to working toward the kind of society our Constitution says we can be, by doing the work that will bring us psychological liberation and ultimately gender equity. The current situation makes a mockery of the values of the Constitution, but choosing different behavior can bring us closer to a society in which the gender values of the Constitution are entrenched. Would it not be a wonderful thing if this was the legacy we left our siblings, our symbolic children and grandchildren, to leave behind a legacy, a society that makes sense when read against the Constitution and the Women's March in particular. A society that really takes everyone's humanity seriously, that does not restrict freedom of movement for its women and girls, a country that protects women, each woman, man's or transgender person's right to choice and association, a country in which a trial such as the Zuma rape trial is impossible. It would be an amazing thing if we wake up in 2056 South African women and girls really had freedom of movement, as passes, actually more slippery passwords, were a fact relegated to history books. This is not an impossible legacy, and indeed, it's an urgent future to build. And that is the end of the chapter. I think I've been reading for over an hour now. The next chapter is the name of the book that Pumla wrote after this, called The Female Fear Factory. Thank you, Taro. I'm always up for hugs. And this is quite an interesting one because, we kind of went through a social media journey with Pumla as she wrote The Female Fear Factory. It was quite interesting. And I want to give that the attention it deserves, so I'm going to stop there for today. Any questions? You can DM me, do all those wonderful things. You can put questions in the Discord thingamabob. all of those things. You can follow me on Twitch, on YouTube, and you can find the link to my Discord server in my link tree. Remember, I do these readings for free Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays at 10 p.m. South African Standard Time, sometimes at 11 when I'm watching Bridgerton. That was my day yesterday. If you feel the need to donate, please do. The Patreon that I have is also in there if you can afford to subscribe. It's $1, $5, $10, and $20 tiers. You get different things on each different tier. And yeah, subscribe to all the things, but mostly remember to drink water, take your meds, eat something, smash the motherfucking patriarchy, eat all the white men, and if you don't eat meat, compost them, because I hear they make very good compost. And remember to be kind, especially to yourselves, because everybody deserves kindness, including you. Donald Trump definitely doesn't, and I'm going to be writing a piece on Trump's absolute fucking fuckery, for the want of a better fucking term. Absolute fucking fuckery. Because, they're saying, oh, it wasn't actually him with the e-files. What? What? How is this Biden's fault, apparently? Yeah, so I'm going to stick around on Discord because I need to continue writing. And I need to send you this thingamabob, so I got your email address somewhere. And yeah, be good. I shall see you on Tuesday for the next reading. Same time, different book. Yeah, see y'all then. Yeah, maybe see you on Discord. Maybe you can join VC there. Thank you for hanging out with me. Thank you for all the gifts and for the likes and for the tappies and the shares and all of that. Y'all are amazing and I love y'all so much. Bye. And same goes for you, Twitch and YouTube. I shall see y'all on Tuesday.